morning, Bethel students, wherever you are. Matt here with your weekly devotional, encouraging you to do all that you do to the glory of God.
That's how winning is done.
Well, we're going to continue our look at the book of Ecclesiastes, and this week we're going to be looking at chapter 3, which is a pretty well-known passage. In chapter 1, we saw that the preacher introduces his main thesis, namely that death puts an end to our repetitive quest for greatness, gain, and grandeur. Instead, he teaches us we are simply part of the generation who came after the last one and before the next. But it's not that the whole of our lives comes and goes like a vapor. In chapter 2, the preacher explained that all the pursuits and pleasure to which we give ourselves within our lives also slip through our fingers with little satisfaction. Now, in chapter 3, the preacher brings together both the big picture, which is the whole of life, and the individual parts, the seasons of life, and begins to explain why our lack of control over either is the very thing that can give us hope. Now, I would encourage you to stop here and read Ecclesiastes chapter 3, verses 1 through 22 by yourself, as I'll only be reading verses 1 through 8, a passage I am sure you've heard before. God's word says this: "For everything there is a season, and a time for every matter under heaven, a time to be born and a time to die, a time to plant and a time to pluck up what is planted, a time to kill and a time to heal, a time to break down and a time to build up, a time to weep and a time to laugh, a time to mourn and a time to dance, a time to cast away stones and a time to gather stones together, a time to embrace and a time to refrain from embracing, a time to seek and a time to lose, a time to keep and a time to cast away, a time to tear and a time to sow, a time to keep silence and a time to speak, a time to love and a time to hate, a time for war and a time for peace." Now let's break this down just a little bit. 1. Life moves in God-ordained seasons. For everything there is a season and a time for every matter under heaven. The preacher lists 14 pairs of opposites to show that all of life falls under God's appointed times: birth and death, joy and sorrow, building and tearing down. Nothing in our lives is random. All is held in God's providential plan. So instead of resisting change, embrace the season God has you in. Ask, what is God teaching me in this time? This brings freedom from anxiety. We don't have to control everything because God orders our days. 2. God is sovereign and we are finite. He has made everything beautiful in its time. Also, he has put eternity into man's heart, yet so that he cannot find out what God has done from the beginning to the end. We long to understand the full scope of God's plan, eternity in our hearts, but our knowledge is limited. God's work is eternal and unchanging, while our lives are fleeting. So accept that you won't always understand why things happen. This is humility. Trust the God who sees the whole picture. Instead of frustration, let your limits push you to reverence. Stand in awe of the God whose purposes endure forever. And this is the heart of worship. 3. The proper response: joyful contentment. I perceive that there is nothing better for them than to be joyful and to do good as long as they live. Since life is short and mysterious, Solomon concludes that the best response is to enjoy God's gifts, work, food, relationships, with gratitude. This is not hedonism, but thankful reception of life as God's gift. So cultivate contentment by noticing God's daily gifts: family meals, beauty in creation. Live with joy in the present rather than being consumed by regrets of the past or fears of the future. 4. God's justice gives life meaning. God will judge the righteous and the wicked, for there is a time for every matter and for every work. Life under the sun seems unfair. Oppression, injustice, and death abound. Yet Solomon insists that there will be a reckoning. God will judge. Death reminds us of our creaturely dependence, but it also drives us to live well before God. When faced with injustice, trust that God will make all things right in His time. Let the certainty of death and judgment sober you into living wisely and righteously now. As David Gibson writes, "Satisfaction comes when you know you are a time-bound creature and God is the eternal creator. Satisfaction lodges in my heart when I accept the boundaries of my creaturely existence and accept the seasons of my life as coming from His good and wise hands. Accepting these things is the gift of God. For left to our own devices, we accept neither. I often refuse to accept that I am a creature by never expecting to walk through deep valleys, but only experiencing the mountaintops. Living well in God's world means recognizing that when it comes to our own lives, we are not mini gods, and that this is His creation, not ours. We have all the pieces of our life given to us, and things come and go, and seasons change. And it is only God who knows exactly where everything is meant to go, in which order, at what time, and why. So, when you recognize and have a proper understanding of God's sovereignty, what difference might that truth make to the worries and anxieties that you have in the moment? How could you have a wiser perspective on your own time? What are the things you seek to control, and what might it look like to surrender that control? This week, I would encourage you to read Ecclesiastes chapter 3, verses 1 through 22, and ponder on these questions. And Lord willing, I'll see you on Sunday. God bless.